Ladies and gentlemen, I have on numerous occasions described myself as the Pollyanna of the freedom movement, because while many of my fellow freedom fighters drag their chins on the ground in despair, convinced there's no hope in saving America, I see the positive. I see opportunity. I see victory. And so tonight, as I stand before some of the greatest freedom fighters in the nation, let me share with you why I feel so positive about our prospects for a renewed era of freedom in America. First, a little background. As many of you know, I, along with JBS, have spent most of the past 20 years sounding the alarm against Agenda 21. You and I know that Agenda 21 means the dismantling of the American ideal of limited government, free enterprise, and individual liberty, leaving instead a matrix of unelected boards and councils and regional governments, which essentially translate into the perfect definition of a Soviet, which means top-down control with a predetermined outcome, global governance. It's all designed to harmonize the United States into the socialist world community without having to fire a shot. But hiding behind the excuse of environmental protection, the UN has made incredible progress in getting Americans to toss their freedoms on the bonfire like a good old-fashioned book burning. The International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, ICLEI, a United Nations sanctioned NGO that was literally created to bring Agenda 21 into local communities, has gotten an incredible number of American county commissions and city councils across the country to sign on as dues-paying members. For most of the past 2 decades, through ICLEI's guidance, Agenda 21 has been slowly filtered into planning policy at all levels of government, basically unnoticed and unchallenged. Today, there are hundreds of planning associations who make their living from federal, state, and local grants created for the purpose of implementing Agenda 21. Yet many of these planning groups don't even know that they are implementing Agenda 21. They're just following the pre-written rules. The grants and the policy guidelines were written by ICLEI and other non-governmental organizations, the same ones who helped write Agenda 21 at the UN level and then helped to create Bill Clinton's President's Council on Sustainable Development. These same NGOs then moved into state government and then into local government and then into the planning groups like the American Planning Association, which is literally in every community in America. Of course, as this dastardly scheme to transform our nation into a Soviet moves forward, its perpetrators continue to deny any such international connection. It's all local, we're assured. And we're mockingly told over and over again by proponents of Agenda 21 that the UN has no enforcement capability and that there are no blue-helmeted troops down at City Hall. Very cute. But the fact is, the NGOs are the stormtroopers who are carrying the UN's bidding straight to your county commissioners, and as a result, just a year and a half ago, ICLEI claimed 600 American cities as dues-paying members who are loyally and doggedly implementing Agenda 21 policy in the name of local planning projects. Today, ICLEI is driving towards 1,000 members by 2015. The next step in the Agenda 21 assault is the Rio Plus 20 summit scheduled for next month. Many greatly fear the Rio Plus 20 summit and what its results will mean in America. Many of our own freedom activists believe this will be the end game to put the lid on American freedom. The UN, in fact, has big plans. It sees the summit as an opportunity to secure binding agreements that will give the United Nations, the European Commission, and even our own EPA and numerous other government agencies massive power to control energy and economic activities. Of course, it will all be in the name of protecting the environment and controlling economic development and ensuring social equity and giving capitalism a human face and reinventing the world. Nothing new here. In short, they see Rio Plus 20 as their opportunity to build a major momentum behind the achievements over the last 20 years and finish the job. Says a Reuters news story, quote, "The time seems right. National resources are at a premium. The global human population tops 7 billion. Traditional economies are failing, and the planet is warming. This summit," the article insists, "offers a chance to renew the political will to make the world's economies greener." Yeah. They can hardly contain themselves, giddy with excitement. However, I see it somewhat differently. I believe the Rio Plus 20 summit gives us a greater opportunity to get more people to listen to our message. It will make more Americans aware. It will energize our activists. It will alert more politicians. And in fact, this may be the opportunity you and I have been looking for to actually kill the drive for Agenda 21 once and for all. Let me tell you what I mean. Until 2010, the UN and its global forces staked everything on climate change and global warming as the excuse for the need for global governance. Under the threat of environmental Armageddon, the UN could argue that no individual sovereign nation had the ability or the desire to curtail global warming. Only the centralized force of the UN could do what was necessary, and so the stage was set for global control. The final act of the climate change forces was to come at the meeting in Copenhagen as they planned to close the deal, change the world economy to cap and trade, end the folly of nation states and free markets, and redistribute the world's wealth once and for all. Then disaster struck. Just before the Copenhagen conference, ClimateGate burst on the scene to reveal private correspondence among the global warming Chicken Littles. It seems that even they couldn't find any evidence of warming. Worse, the correspondence revealed how they taught each other tricks on how to hide their lack of evidence so they could keep up their little charade that they so desperately needed. As a result of that shocking revelation, the Copenhagen conference ended in disaster. The first clue was the sight of Al Gore rushing to his gas-guzzling limo to hightail it out of town. Shortly after that failed event, there was a second conference in Durban, which also ended with the climate change forces in disarray. There has never been such a total and utter collapse of a major political force as we have seen with climate change. And now comes Rio Plus 20. To avoid the disasters of Copenhagen and Durban, the UN plans to avoid talking about the issue of climate change. Instead, they will repackage their failed programs under the banner of sustainable development, replacing climate change with the old Agenda 21 claims that the world needs to ensure that economic development will not endanger the resources and environmental quality needed for future generations. According to Brazilian Ambassador André Carreira de Lago, this rebranding is being done by design because, he says, sustainable development is an easier sell than climate change. To launch its new campaign, the UN has issued a 99-page report entitled Resilient People, Resilient Planet, A Future Worth Choosing. I love their writers. This blueprint for sustainable development and low carbon prosperity, of course, outlines the need for yet more government. It includes calls for a global council, new UN agencies, budgets and power, and genuine global actions in every nation to ensure social justice, poverty eradication, climate protection, biodiversity, green growth, and an end to unsustainable patterns of consumption and production. Agenda 21, which they keep telling us doesn't exist, by the way. All of this is essential, the report says, to prevent irreversible damage that is predicted by selected scientists, get this, selected scientists, activists, and computer models. There's a trio with whom to entrust our futures. From that platform, they intend to fan out over the world and increase efforts to enforce sustainable constraints in communities, counties, and schools. ICLEI has never been so excited at the prospects of finally fulfilling the dream. In short, they've staked everything on fully implementing Agenda 21. And I couldn't be happier. Because, you see, there is a fly in the ointment. It's called you and me. As I mentioned earlier, for 18 years, I and a very few others, including John Birch Society, worked to sound the alarm about sustainable development. For the most part, we were ignored, and ICLEI and their buddies marched into the void and filled it with highly organized planning commissions. We had absolutely no contact with any elected officials. There were certainly no news articles being written about our positions, even negative ones. In short, about the only attention we got was from the stealth observers from the Southern Poverty Law Center as they sneaked into our national conferences. The silence was deafening. But about a year and a half ago, that started to change. With the advent of the Tea Party and the election of Obama, people started to question everything. For the first time, people wanted to hear what we had to say. They were shocked to learn not only what a diabolical plan was Agenda 21, but how far it had come almost completely unnoticed. With a great assist from John Birch, I hit the road, taking the message to well over half the states in almost 100 talks in just over a year, and more coming. The response has been nothing short of phenomenal. Hundreds of meetings are now being held in communities across the country. New spokesmen for our cause have stepped up to carry the message. County commissions and city councils are being put under siege. Tea Party activists have become human information sponges, rushing to learn all they can. My audiences over the year have grown from an average of about 50 to an average of about 250, as high as 400, as high as even 800 to 1,000 in a couple of occasions. For the first time, I'm being contacted by both elected officials and the news media. They want to understand, and they are acting on that information. And the results are showing in a major way. Let me give you just a few of the details. In January of 2011, in Carroll County, Maryland, 5 new commissioners took the oath of office. They had run as a team, and a major part of their message was against a bad policy called sustainable development. Almost immediately after taking office, the leader of this new group of commissioners, Richard Rothschild, called my office. I didn't return his call because I had never been contacted by an elected official before. I didn't take it seriously until I was contacted by one of my supporters from Maryland who said he was working with an incredible county commissioner to stop Agenda 21 in his county. I looked down at this unanswered phone message and I said, is that Richard Rothschild? He said, yes, it is. Within a half an hour, he and I were on the phone together, and his efforts have been nothing short of amazing. Within the first month of holding office, his county had ended their membership in ICLEI, the first in the nation to do that. Then they fired the Sustainable Development Administrator. And then they rejected the county development plan, sending it back to the planning board with the instructions to not return with it until the plan assured that it protected private property rights and that it complied with the U.S. Constitution. That was the first shots fired in the battle to stop Agenda 21. And then things really started to roll. The next county to take action to revoke their ICLEI membership was Amador County, California. Then Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Then Edmond, Oklahoma. Then Las Cruces, New Mexico. Then Spartanburg, South Carolina. Then Albemarle County, Virginia, the home of Thomas Jefferson. Then Plantation, Florida. Then James City County, Virginia, where America basically started with Jamestown. Then Lexington, Virginia. We can now also add Carver, Massachusetts, Pinellas County, Florida, Garland, Texas, Sarasota County, Florida, Abington, Virginia, Clallam County, Washington, Chatham County, North Carolina, Monmouth County and Somerset counties in New Jersey, College Station, Texas, home of the Texas A&M, Irvine, Texas. All of these communities have voted to rescind their memberships in ICLEI. In fact, I believe at least 60 communities have pulled out of ICLEI since January of 2011, while only 17 new communities have become members of ICLEI. That is a net reduction of 43 communities, and I don't think we are accounting for all of them yet. ICLEI itself now only lists about 550 members, where a year ago it was 600. I get reports every day of major battles being fought by activists against Agenda 21 policies. Just last week, I received an excited email from activists in York County, South Carolina, that their county council had voted 4-3 to abolish their already prepared 500-page Unified Development Ordinance that ICLEI had helped write. More than 150 dedicated activists led that successful fight. All of these communities have taken the vital first step to ending Agenda 21 in their community. But as you and I know, it is only a first step in a very, very long process, but it has begun. And those victories are only the beginning of the successes that I can report to you. In Florida, the state legislature has passed and the governor has signed legislation to repeal smart growth laws. That means that now counties are free from state mandates. This is landmark legislation. In New Hampshire, 2 bills before the legislature. One prohibits any state or local government entity to give any money to ICLEI in any way possible, dues or otherwise. The other prohibits state and local government agents from entering private property without the written permission of the property owners. What is that? How do you pronounce it?
Clackamas County.
You wanted me to say that? Clackamas County. We can add Clackamas County, Oregon. Without ICLEI, yeah. Yeah. Who's speaking here? That same language about protecting keeping government agents off of private property is now in a new bill by U.S. Senator Rand Paul, S-2122. His bill is designed to rein in the power of the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers from using the Clean Water Act for taking private property. But it also says federal agents must have written permission to enter private property. Protection of private property is a major key to stopping enforcement of Agenda 21. In April, both houses of the state legislature of Tennessee passed an anti-Agenda 21 resolution. It's not binding, but it's a statement nonetheless. I just learned this afternoon that the Republican governor refused to sign that. So we're going to have to put some pressure on him, but they did it, they passed it, and that is a major step forward no matter what. Legislators in the state of Wisconsin are working on a new bill, similar to the one in Florida, to free communities of mandatory comprehensive development plans. And in Washington, the state legislature now has an anti-Agenda 21 caucus headed by State Representative Matt Shea. He's got 8 members in part of that. And finally, on January 13th of this year, the Republican National Committee unanimously passed a resolution entitled Exposing United Nations Agenda 21. And that is helping in a big way to bring formerly reluctant Republicans into the fight. Moreover, finally, some of the Washington-based conservative groups, which in the past have refused to even mention Agenda 21, have begun to change their tune. Last fall, the Heritage Foundation finally did a story on Agenda 21. It wasn't a very good one, but they did it nonetheless. I was invited on Fox News back in February. Glenn Beck has used my material for several broadsides against Agenda 21. And even Newt Gingrich called me for information after he was shouted down at campaign rallies for his lame answers to Agenda 21 questions. Call Tom DeWeese, the crowd kept shouting. So he did. And as a result, while I was on travel in Montana doing a series of JBS meetings, the internet lit up as Newt went on Sean Hannity and started talking about Agenda 21. I'll take it wherever I can get it. Revolution against sustainable development is taking place in every corner of this nation. In a panic, ICLEI is now rushing to cleanse its website of any mention of the United Nations. The American Planning Association has organized a boot camp to train its people how to counter our efforts. Says the APA memo, listen to this, quote, "Given the heightened scrutiny of planners by some members of the public, what is said or not said is especially important in building support for planning." Careful what you say. So they are teaching their planners to drop the main words of Agenda 21 and are replacing them with a George Orwell style of newspeak designed to lull you into sleep. Here are just a few of the words that they are now telling their people to no longer use. Facilitate, regionalism, smart growth, stakeholders, sustainability, councils of government, eminent domain, and mixed-use development, to name a very few. And they caution, listen to this, quote, "Avoid talking about or linking plans and planning with regulatory matters." My friends, planning is nothing but regulatory matters. Of course, they aren't changing the plans at all, the policies, they're just changing the words. As they become more concerned about our efforts, their attacks have increased in the media, where once they just ignored us, they've pulled out the big guns. The national news media is on a tear to paint us as a conspiracy theory of wackos, and I'm proud to be named in almost every one of them. The Washington Post said anti-planners were acting on a hoax. The New York Times, in a front-page story on a Sunday newspaper, had a headline that said, "Activists fight green projects seeing UN plot." Mother Jones magazine, which contacted me yesterday wanting an interview, used this mocking headline, "We don't need none of that smart growth communism." I'm really going to do an interview with this idiot. And then there is a website that did an expose on me called Wingnut Watch. The fact is, Our opponents are trying their best to ridicule us and paint our movement as extremists. It's not working. We are growing stronger every day. And that's why I'm thrilled that the global planners have decided to put their full force behind sustainable development to drive their plans. Because they are rebranding their efforts for global governance by using what is fast becoming their weakest weapon. And that's because you and I are making the very terms Sustainable Development and Agenda 21 political poison. It's becoming an untouchable in government circles across the nation. And this just in. News leaking from behind the closed doors of the UN Preparatory Committee in Rio Plus 20, the group responsible for providing the finished global plan for action, which has been titled The Future That We Want, is in big trouble. For weeks, they have failed to reach consensus on the final agenda that world leaders are supposed to approve and adopt. Apparently, it's not the future we all want. In short, the Rio Plus 20 conference hasn't even convened, and already it's in trouble. Who said world domination was easy? We obviously have a very, very long way to go. I have no illusions about that. They are at every level of government, and they have power, money, the news media, and the current American ignorance to fuel their efforts. But for the first time since I started down the road to expose Agenda 21, I believe if we stay vigilant and vigorous, if we refuse to hang our heads in despair, we will succeed in crushing it. There's a story that, as I've been speaking around the country, I've related to my audiences to make a point. And I'll close with that now. Perhaps you've seen the film Robin Hood, the one that's starring Russell Crowe. As I watched it, I was struck by the similarities between the people of England of the 13th century and the forces of tyranny that we face in America today. It was a time of serfs who had no rights, no property, and only poverty in their future. It was a time when the king owned everything, from land to livestock. And it was a time when tax collectors could literally confiscate everything you had in the name of the king, leaving you with virtually nothing. In 13th century England, the people attempted to rise up and free themselves of the shackles of the king's government. All they wanted was the ability to benefit from the fruits of their own labor. The people then knew what they had to do if ever they were going to be free. The slogan under which they organized was, "Rise and rise again until lambs become lions." There's nothing new in Agenda 21. It's the same old worn-out tyranny with new names and new words and new kings. Today, as we face an ever-growing tyranny by a Congress and a president, and as well as elected officials at every level who ignore you and lie to you and deny their actions that you can plainly see, Americans, for the first time in our history, are facing the same evil those Englishmen faced so long ago. But in their desperation to complete their agenda, they have pushed too far, too fast, and they have exposed themselves. For the first time, average people can see the raw power grab, and it's leading to their undoing. And so, for the first time that I can remember, in my long fight for freedom, we are winning battles. We've established a beachhead. We are on Utah Beach on D-Day, and we're heading inland. And do you know how long it took the forces of freedom to destroy the invincible Nazi juggernaut once we'd established that beachhead? Less than a year. Our enemies are terrified of us because deep down they know their plans are evil and doomed to failure. Their entire plan is built on a house of cards, on lies. Their only hope is that we are ignorant and pliable and afraid to stand and fight. So, it's time to stop accepting defeat, Stop looking down at our shoes in despair. Believe in the ideals of freedom because they are right. After 60 years of battle for the John Birch Society, after my 40-plus years of activism, this is our turn. We are the ones to show the way for Americans who know something is wrong but lack the knowledge of what to do. We are the ones to lead the fight to reestablish the republic of our forefathers. Now is our time. Rise and rise again until lambs become lions. Thank you.